And welcome back to the castle, everybody. This is Nightsaber Z42, and today we're going to take a look at fortresses. Now, this is the most different part of the book, considering that it doesn't have anything that builds upon any of the previous chapters. It's made specifically to be like an add-on to a city or a capital or anything like that, or settlement, basically. But I decided to take a different approach to this one. So I had a theme in mind, and as I said in the last video, I have two different factions of Dragonborn. And one of them had a floating capital city. The other one actually has a sky fortress that actually goes around in a predetermined path throughout the land that it resides in. So I had to take the concept of a fortress and somehow redesign it into that of a place where a lot more people that should really be there can live in. So when we take a look at some of the roles, there are some results that I had to opt in to make it a little bit more believable. So without further ado, let's take a look at Drakenguard Keep. So the first thing that you do is you do a location relationship to the settlement. And this one is actually built into the city itself, so I decided to go for prominent. It is very old. It's between 200 and 500 years old, which actually gives a -2 to the condition roll, which is poor. It's quite old, so that means it's actually, there's stuff that's kind of falling apart. And this actually becomes a theme for this particular faction of the Dragonborn, which I actually fleshed out a little bit more by building this capital for this faction. So Drakenguard Keep is not only a fortress, but it's the capital for this specific faction of Dragonborn. So if you've ever read the Dragonlance series of books, there was a flying fortress that I guess the evil Dragonborn had used to kind of circumnavigate some of the defenses of the good races or whatever. So that's kind of the concept that I took with this and kind of built upon that. So for the environment, it's a floating fortress, and just like with the Drakenfall Peak, I've also opted to put this one over the valley because the whole region is basically a valley, so it made sense. And it is a floating fortress as well, just a little bit different than the capital. For the expenses, I rolled on significance. So the fortress was built with a large budget, obviously, allowing for high quality materials and some luxury elements. Now, also, this fortress was built with war in mind. And as we'll definitely see that in a later roll that I came up with, but the main purpose for this fortress was to be a mobile war machine, basically. I definitely opted to take some of the higher rolls as opposed to rolling. So for the primary building material, I kind of fudged this roll a little bit. I rolled for stone, but since it was also flying, I also kind of added the magic to keep it floating. So for the resource origin, it was harvested locally. Since it's in a valley, that's quite easy to do. And for the reason for construction, the one that made sense to me the most was anticipation. Basically, it was made for war. The design theme is for glory, prestige, and triumph. Alternate entries, I have a secret portal. And that is not on here, I don't think. That's something that I came up with myself because being in a sky fortress and that's going on a predetermined path throughout the land, you really don't have many alternate entries other than the front door. So what I've opted to do, I created a secret portal that is located in some sort of a lost ruin from aeons ago, from centuries ago. So there's that. The local impact from that fortress being built is advantageous. So now all of the Dragonborn in the surrounding area now are defended, basically, especially since it was a time of war. And for the residents, I have original. So these Dragonborn that live here are original descendants of the builders. I did not take resident relations or resident hobbies. Those things were very trivial for me, and they didn't really fit, especially since the residents are going to be vastly more than what you would typically get in a fortress. But I did go ahead and roll for the resident attitude, and I actually rolled irritated, which kind of started bringing these ideas that the fortress is in a state of disrepair. It's something is happening to it where the people don't really care for it much. They're very irritated. So I kind of went with that. Especially with this roll, I just kind of kept going into it and picking options that really fit. The garrison size is at its maximum, since this was supposed to be a fortress war machine. That only made sense, and I actually chose that. I didn't roll on that one. For the garrison equipment, we have decent, and I did roll for that one, so I could have went with any of those options. Would have made for some very interesting storytelling if they were quite poor. So, they're at average, so whatever. For the current issue, that's something that's like problematic. What issues are they facing? And I rolled a magical anomaly. So an area of magical disturbance is causing problems. The residents may or may not be aware of what caused the anomaly. And this is something that I haven't really fleshed out quite yet, but if my players manage to get here, or if they should hear of a rumor leading towards this area, then that would be something that I would flesh out then and there. But for now, I haven't really picked it out, but I'll keep that in mind as I present this to my players. And the issue severity is actually going to be critical. For history, none of these options really seem to do it for me, but I've already had some pre-established history in mind, so I just wrote the War of the Dragons, which is on my World Anvil page that I linked in the last video, or at least in the sheet for that video. There are secrets that you can roll. I rolled Secret Rites. So an ancient ritual was performed here before the fortress was built. And then there are some oddities that you can also roll, which I opted not to do because it just makes it seem like a haunted mansion type of area, and none of these really fit the theme of what I was going to do here, so I didn't roll for these. I did roll for the special feature, or at least the villain portion of it, because the special feature is already going to be a sky fortress. It's a floating city, so that was something that I had to take. But I really like this table because it gives you one table that you roll for, which is the special feature table. So you have a resident of a great person or a creature or monster, magical property, unknown origins, intriguing purpose, catastrophic event, miraculous event, or bizarre location. And then there's a table for each of those that fleshes it out further. So I actually opted to take the villain path because a long time ago, these would have been the bad guys, quote unquote. So there would have been a villain here who would have probably done some sort of secret rite. I would have tried to connect those two, but it really doesn't matter because that's all in the past. So there's that. But you do get a table for all of those options that you would have rolled for in the special feature. And one of them is actually a sky fortress. So I didn't really need to roll on that. I just decided to take that. Let's see. So then we get to step 2. And actually, before we progress, I will actually mention here that this is built upon 3 different steps. And you can actually take it as far as you want. So everybody rolls on the general stuff. That's a given. And then you roll on the keep. Because if you're doing a fortress, you have to have a keep. But after that, it's all optional. So if I only want to keep something like a small fortress, then I would just do step 2 and then I would be done with it. And then if I wanted something a little bit bigger, I could do step 3, which is fleshing out the castle portion of the fortress. And if I wanted to take it a little bit further, I would go on to the stronghold part, which I will get to that in just a moment. So for now, I started rolling for the stuff for the keep, which was a little bit complicated at first, just because when you look at it, it's like, wait a minute, I have to calculate and do math and figure out how many squares it is. Yes and no. I would say just kind of go with it unless you plan on making a map of your fortress. If you're planning on making a map of the fortress, then yeah, you might want to pay a little bit more attention to it. But since I already knew that this was going to be a very massive fortress castle thingy-mabob that's floating in the sky, then I knew that everything needed to be maximum, especially since I'm going to have an entire city living within this fortress itself. So this step wasn't as complicated as I made it out to be when I was reading through it at first, until I realized that, hey, I don't really need this right now. But I did roll for some of this. I rolled to have a round shape instead of a box shape, which I was a little bit disappointed in because I like angular things, but that's just my preference. And then you roll for the size, which I opted to take very large because I need as much space if I'm going to make this into a city fortress, basically. And so we get a base size modifier, the BSM, which is 4, and this is used to calculating how many squares or the dimensions of your fortress, or the keep rather, because we're working on the keep. We do get an option for exterior wall thickness. Unfortunately, I rolled a 1 on that, so I only get a 1 foot thick wall, which is like, okay, sure. I was really hoping for that 15-foot super ultra wide wall, you know. But whatever. Nah, we don't need that. But we do get the number of floors, which I believe I took the maximum just to give me more space. So there's 6 floors altogether. The entrance is raised, which I did roll for. So you basically have stairs that lead to an upper floor entryway, and it wraps around the structure as necessary. And we do get a portcullis as our entry defense. So yay, our floating impregnable fortress gets some defenses. And then we start working on things inside of the keep. So we have the number of rooms, or the number of rooms which is determined by our BSM, the base size modifier, times the number of floors, which is 6, which makes it to 24. And then I have a -1 condition modifier, so it should be actually 23. So I have 23 rooms to work with, and you actually do get a set number. Oh, you do get certain rooms, and those rooms do count towards your size allotment. So, as it says right here, starting rooms, your keep comes with the following: bedroom / sleeping area, kitchen, cooking area, and a dining or receiving area. So those 3 are guaranteed things to get, and I kind of wish they had just put that in there, like they did with some of the other sheets that I've had. And then I also got a guard bunk from one of my earlier rolls. Yes, for the garrison size, since I rolled maximum, I get to add a guard bunk to the listed starting area. So that's 4 rooms already taken out of my 23. So I rolled 19 more times to flesh it out even more. And actually for this one, I didn't roll so much as choose all the options that were applicable to it being a war fortress, and then rolling what was left. So there are some options that I didn't take, like I don't think I took a closet, because why? But then I started rolling on some other things and getting some duplicates. So for example, I rolled some more guard bunks, some more privies, and some equipment storages and general storages, and a dining and receiving. And for those last 3 options, I wrote extension because I'm not exactly going to have different, I'm not going to have the same type of room in a different location of the fortress. I would just create a super large room. So for example, I rolled 2 equipment storages, right? So I would have just 1 equipment storage area, but it would just be bigger than your average one. Same with the general store, and same with the dining and receiving. And at first I was going to do it with the guard bunks, but then it actually makes sense to have guard bunks in different parts of the keep. So I decided not to go ahead and create a super large guard bunk for that purposes. So we get furnishings, which is the quality of your items within those rooms. And I got decent, so the contents of the keep are serviceable quality or in good condition, which is pretty good since the rest of the keep is pretty bad. And then I wrote a blurb here about what the extensions mean, just as a reminder for myself. So if you are content with just doing a keep, then this is where you would stop. but I needed something bigger and better, so I went on to step 3, which is the castle portion. A lot of this didn't really apply, so the geographic advantage did not apply because we're in the air, so whatever advantage we would get would just be negated by that fact alone. In fact, being in the air is advantageous in of itself and grants even better advantages to any of these options. So there we go. It's in the sky. That's its advantage. I did roll for the style, and this is actually pretty cool. I actually did not roll for the style, by the way. I actually took concentric because it's what made the most sense for it being a floating sky fortress. But if this was on the ground, then I would have rolled for it. So you have a Motte and Bailey, a shell keep, a fortified keep, and then the concentric castle. And I like how they actually included a picture of what each one represents, just to kind of get the layout as well as an explanation. So that was very well done. I like it when they include that stuff in the character or in the sheet itself. The size is very large. The base size modifier is 4, which we'll come back to that in just a moment because I actually have a gripe for that one. The curtain wall thickness. So curtain walls are basically how thick your walls are. So you could have extra thick walls or you can just have some really thin walls, and I believe I rolled fairly low on this. So I have a 15-foot by 10-foot wall thickness. The curtain height is 10 feet tall, although these are actually modified in a later roll. So then we get to figure out how many wall towers we're going to have along the curtain for this part of the castle. So it's BSM plus 1d4. So I actually rolled a 4, so it was a 4 plus 4, which is an 8. So I have 8 wall towers on the curtain, on the wall, basically. And they are of a round shape. And the tower size is medium, so I get to add plus 10 to the curtain wall height. And the tower roof is a flat roof. Those are things that I rolled. Then we get to the curtain wall defenses. So I rolled number 3, so I got significant. Oh, sorry, the expense was significant, so I got to roll 3 times, is what I meant to say. And you can see here that I could get 4 rolls, right? But there's only 3 spots available. So, yeah, there's that. So I rolled 3 times. I got batters. So I also got hoardings and magical defenses. And for the magical defense, I would roll again. Well, I would have to roll here, which I didn't do at the time. I did later. So I would actually just choose one of these. You would roll a d6. You can get blocking wards, aggressive wards, unliving sentinels, alarm wards, relocation wards, and unnatural elemental presence. For here, I would actually just, for now, I would probably do aggressive wards because this is supposed to be a war machine type fortress. So I would go ahead and do that. Then we get the Barbicans. This is a forest structure acting as a checkpoint, and for attackers, a forced navigation of lethal obstacles leading up to the castle's main gate. I actually have no experience with castles and stuff like that, so all of this was brand new to me and trying to figure out what each of these meant. But you do roll a d20. I got a gate. The gatehouse leads to a walled approach, which is the second option. So you just click on it and it check marks it for you. And then at least it gives you an illustration of what it means. So that really does help me out. You can also get a drawbridge and a gatehouse that is also preceded by a drawbridge. So you basically have 2 drawbridges right there. And then we get to the gatehouses. And this is where I started getting really confused. And I just opted not to really do anything because I rolled a strong gatehouse, 1.5 times the height and thickness of its wall. Entry is covered by heavy doors and a portcullis, although I didn't know what any of these options meant. So, and there wasn't any illustrations to actually help point that out. So this is one of those instances where I feel like the illustrations actually really hindered me because I didn't know what they were talking about. So I just decided to skip the gatehouses altogether. I did roll for moat. There is no moat. I rolled a 2, so there's no moat. So there's no need to roll for moat width or depth because there's no moat. For the barrack location, it's built on the keep, and that was something that I rolled for, and it was built on the keep, so we have extra large barracks, I suppose. And then we get to the Bailey Outbuildings. So the Bailey is the space within the castle's innermost walls. So it's the BSM plus 1, which is 5. So remember how I said the BSM for this area was 4? There's only 4 spaces. So yeah, they really didn't take into account getting the maximum BSM for this, unless I'm missing something, but I'm pretty sure it was a straight roll and I rolled straightly 4. So there's that. So then what you would do is you would roll for the size for each of these. I rolled medium, medium, large, and medium. So I guess we're having a lot of medium stuff. And then there are outbuilding purposes. So there are 7 options available here: servants' quarters, kitchens, bakehouse, a chapel, the stables, storage, and the forge. So I opted to take storage, the bakehouse, a weapons workshop, which is something not here, but I figured that since this was going to be an attacking fortress, that they would have cannons and stuff like that on the side, so they would be continually experimenting and making their own weaponry and stuff like that. And then of course I roll for kitchen. Now something else that you could do is you could do freeform buildings. So think of it like as you have a set number of squares, and then you would just basically, like a puzzle piece, just fit things into where you want them within that allotment of squares that you would have available. Which, if I was mapping this out, I would love to have done, but since this is going to most likely be abstract anyways, I didn't really see the need to do that. But there is space for that option if you decide to take it. So this is where you would stop if you were only wanting to do castles, but I wanted to do strongholds as well. I wanted to give myself the maximum allotment of space that I could to basically play with. So I went ahead and did the rolls for this one as well. And I was a little bit disappointed by what they had here, because there really isn't any bonuses here. It's just, or rather, let me rephrase that. There's really not any extra stuff here. It's just additions to what you already have. So this little blurb for strongholds, which is like about not even half a page. So I did roll for the curtain wall reinforcement, which is plus 20 to the thickness and to the wall height. And I also get 1 additional tower. So instead of 8 towers, I now have 9 towers. So we're basically very reinforced on our walls. So yeah, I mean, that's all right and good and stuff, but I would have liked to have had a little bit more, you know. But then you get this nice little table. You have a style amplification, and basically these change the style, I guess, of your fortress. It makes some changes to it, to what you've already rolled. So for instance, I believe I rolled a 12 on the D12. So I have magical forms. Magical runes, symbols, or patterns were planned and worked into the construction of the stronghold itself. This is for the castle portion, so I would roll once on the magical defense table, and I did. I got relocation wards. These wards teleport anyone in the area someplace else, which is pretty cool. And some of the things that you have available, like low Hulk, that's quite a tongue twister to say, makes changes to your keep and to the castle. So there are some really neat options here, but overall, I don't know. I'm a little bit two ways about this one. I wish there was more to it than just, you know, adding extra thickness and height and additional towers. I really feel like they could have done a little bit more with that, but oh well. There's also a brutal defense table that you could possibly roll on if you had actually rolled into it, which I did not. And then, of course, the last page is all dedicated to mapping out your fortress, if you are one of those people that would really like to do that. That is all that there was. It does give you some hints about mapping your keep out, and then, of course, at the end, you have some sample fortresses for you to look at or use. So that is Drakenguard Keep. Of course, this will be located in the description down below, so feel free to check it out, download it, and make any changes that you see fit to it, or use it for your own games, as well as all of the other settlements that I've created using this supplement will also be in that Google Drive folder for you guys. So feel free to leave a comment down below. Feel free to share your own creations and give this video a huge thumbs up to support this series, and subscribe if you would like to see more. I will see you guys in the next video.